Ilara had never known freedom. For as long as she could remember, she had been a prisoner. Her world had once been filled with hope, laughter, and love, but that was before the war that wiped out her people and left her as nothing more than a tool in the hands of others. Now, on a distant planet in a far corner of the galaxy, she found herself enslaved by the cruel Grixians, an alien species known for their strength and ruthlessness. The Grixians had captured her when her homeworld was destroyed, and they had kept her in chains ever since. The Grixians had no mercy for her kind. To them, she was nothing but a symbol of a conquered race, a prisoner to be used however they saw fit. She worked long hours in a dark, damp mine, breaking rocks and hauling heavy loads for them. Each day was the same, a cycle of exhaustion, hunger, and pain. Her body ached from the constant labor, but it was her mind that was the most broken. She had lost count of the years since her people had fallen, and it seemed that escape was nothing more than a distant dream. But Ilara was not one to give up easily. Despite everything, there was still a flicker of hope inside her. She would look up at the stars every night, imagining what it would be like to be free again, to leave this place and find a new life. She had heard rumors of a species called humans, people who were known for their bravery and strength. Some said that the humans were capable of incredible things, even defeating entire armies. Ilara didn't know if the stories were true, but they gave her something to hold on to. Maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who could help her. Her life was a routine. The days blurred together, filled with the same endless tasks and the same harsh treatment from her alien captors. Yet there were moments when she would catch herself dreaming, imagining what it would be like to feel the warmth of the sun on her skin again, to be free of the chains that held her down. One evening, as she worked under the dim glow of the mining lamps, Ilara overheard something that made her heart race. Two Grixian guards were talking in hushed tones. At first, she couldn't make out the words, but then one of them said something that caught her attention. "There's a new ship in orbit," the first guard said. "It's human." The second guard scoffed. "Humans? What are they doing here?" "I don't know, but the commander's orders are clear. We need to be prepared for anything." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. Humans? Here? Could it be possible that the stories she had heard were true? Could there really be someone out there who would come for her, who would set her free? For the first time in years, Ilara felt a spark of hope. The humans might be her only chance for survival. She didn't know when or how they would come, but she made a promise to herself that she would be ready. She had spent so long in darkness, but now, for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that there might be a way out. That night, as she lay on the cold floor of her cell, Ilara stared up at the tiny window in the corner. She could barely see the stars, but she knew they were there. The distant lights in the sky were a reminder that there was more to the universe than the pain and suffering she had known. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, a human would come to set her free. Ilara closed her eyes and let herself dream of freedom. The days passed, and Ilara's hope began to grow stronger. The Grixians had kept her in the mines for months, but lately there had been something different in the air. The guards were on edge, whispering to each other more often. Every once in a while, Ilara would catch snippets of their conversations, and the mention of a human ship was becoming more frequent. Her heart would race each time she heard those words. Could the humans really be coming for her? Could they be the ones to rescue her? Or was it just another cruel joke that the Grixians were playing on her? She couldn't be sure, but the thought of escape, of freedom, filled her with a strange mix of excitement and fear. One evening, as Ilara worked in the mines, she noticed something unusual. The air felt different, humming with an energy that hadn't been there before. She looked up, squinting her eyes against the harsh light of the mining lamps. A low rumble shook the ground beneath her feet. The walls seemed to tremble. The Grixian guards looked nervous. They whispered to each other, hurriedly glancing up at the sky. Something was happening. Ilara's curiosity grew, but she didn't dare ask. She had learned long ago that asking questions could lead to trouble. She stayed focused on her work, trying to keep her head down, but her mind raced with possibilities. And then it happened. A loud, deafening sound filled the air. The ground shook with more force, and Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She knew it. She knew the humans had arrived. Through the dust and smoke, she saw it. The ship. It was a massive, sleek vessel, unlike anything the Grixians had ever built. It was unlike anything Ilara had ever seen. The ship hovered in the sky, a silent giant against the darkening sky. Its shape was sharp, with angular lines and glowing lights along its sides. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The Grixians seemed rattled. They scrambled to their positions, shouting orders to one another. Ilara, too, could feel the tension in the air. She knew this wasn't just another ship. This was something different. This was her chance. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ilara allowed herself to hope. She couldn't explain it, but she felt a connection to that ship, as if the humans inside were already reaching out to her. The thought made her heart race. Could they really be here to help her? To free her from the life she had known for so long? Hours later, the Grixians had locked down the mine, making sure none of the slaves could escape. The human ship had landed on a plateau not far from the mines, and the Grixians were preparing for a confrontation. They were not going to let their prisoners go so easily. Ilara's mind raced. She knew she had to act fast. She had no idea how long the humans would stay or what kind of forces they were up against, but she couldn't waste a single moment. She had to be ready. That night, as the Grixians rested in their quarters, Ilara slipped into the shadows. She moved quietly through the dark corridors of the mine, avoiding the guards as best as she could. Her heart pounded in her chest. Every step she took felt like it might be her last. But the thought of freedom pushed her forward. She made her way to the central control room, where the Grixians monitored everything. Ilara had seen this room before, but she had never dared to enter. Now it was her only chance. With trembling hands, she used the knowledge she had gained from years of observation. She hacked into the system, bypassing the security measures that the Grixians had set up. She had learned the codes through careful listening and watching the guards' patterns. Her heart raced as she worked. Each second felt like an eternity. Finally, the door to the control room slid open. Ilara stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat. She knew she had to act quickly. She reached for the communicator on the console and sent a signal to the human ship. She wasn't sure if it would work, but she had to try. A few moments later, a voice crackled through the communicator. "This is Commander Noah Michaels. We've received your signal. Stay calm. We'll be there soon." Ilara could barely believe what she was hearing. The humans had heard her. They were coming for her. Her heart soared, and for the first time in years, she felt alive. Hope flooded her, and she allowed herself to believe. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The moment that would change her life forever. Ilara's heart raced in her chest as she crouched behind the control room console, holding her breath. The communicator was still buzzing with the faint sound of Commander Noah's voice. "We're almost there. Hold on." She couldn't believe it. The humans were coming. They were coming for her. It was no longer a dream or a distant hope. It was real. The weight of her chains had become lighter with each passing second, her mind racing with thoughts of what would happen next. She had spent so many years longing for this moment, and now that it was here, she had to be brave. She had to believe. But there was no time to waste. Ilara quickly disconnected the communicator and hid it in her clothing, just as the distant sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. She knew the Grixian guards wouldn't stay distracted forever. She had to move. Carefully, she left the control room and crept through the narrow halls of the mining facility. Her heart thudded loudly in her chest, but she pushed forward, knowing this was her one shot at freedom. She remembered the route she had memorized over the years, the paths the guards took, the blind spots, the places where she could hide if necessary. Her time as a prisoner had given her a kind of knowledge the Grixians never suspected she had. As she neared the exit, A loud alarm suddenly blared throughout the complex. The Grixians had detected the breach. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea how they had found out so fast, but she couldn't let fear stop her now. She had to get to the humans, no matter what. The door at the end of the hall was almost within reach when Ilara heard shouting. The Grixians were getting closer, and she could hear the heavy footsteps of their boots pounding against the metal floors. She couldn't afford to be caught now. Without thinking, Ilara ducked into a side room, hoping it would offer her enough cover. Through the narrow opening of the door, she saw a group of Grixian soldiers rush past. Their weapons were drawn, and their expressions were filled with anger and confusion. They were looking for her. They had no idea how close they were to losing her forever. The seconds felt like hours. Ilara held her breath, praying that they wouldn't notice her. The soldiers continued on, moving further down the hall. After what felt like an eternity, she finally exhaled. The room had been her temporary refuge, but she couldn't stay there for long. The humans were waiting for her. She stepped back into the hall and moved as quietly as she could, her feet barely making a sound on the metal floors. She had made it past the first group of guards, but she wasn't out of danger yet. There were still more Grixians searching the facility, but she was getting closer to the exit, closer to freedom. Just then, a door at the far end of the hall opened, and a figure appeared. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. It was a Grixian officer, larger and more imposing than the others. His eyes narrowed as he spotted her, and Ilara knew she couldn't outrun him. The officer's voice boomed, echoing down the hall. "There she is." Ilara didn't hesitate. She turned and bolted for the exit, pushing her legs to move faster than she ever had before. The officer's heavy footsteps followed close behind, but Ilara wasn't going to let him catch her. She reached the door just as the officer's voice called out again, ordering the others to pursue her. The door slid open, and Ilara stepped out into the cool night air. The stars above sparkled brightly, a sharp contrast to the darkness she had known for so long. She took a deep breath, feeling the freedom she had longed for course through her body. But there was no time to stop. She had to keep running. The Grixians would be right behind her, and she needed to get to the human ship. Ahead, she saw a group of human soldiers crouched behind a large rock formation. They had their weapons drawn, scanning the area for any threats. Ilara's heart soared when she recognized the human who was leading them. Commander Noah Michaels. Noah stood tall, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had a strong presence, and Ilara could see the determination in his face. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a leader, someone who would fight to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And in that moment, Ilara knew he was the one who was going to change her life forever. The moment she reached the human soldiers, Commander Noah stepped forward. His eyes softened when he saw her, and he offered her a small, reassuring smile. "You made it," he said, his voice calm but full of relief. "We're here now. You're safe." Ilara's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, unable to find the words to express what she was feeling. She had been trapped in a world of darkness and despair for so long, but now, standing in front of these humans, she felt the weight of her chains finally lift. For the first time in years, she felt free. "Come on," Noah said, extending his hand to her. "We've got a ship waiting." Ilara hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. She knew that this was just the beginning. The battle for freedom had only just started, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a chance. Together, they turned and ran toward the ship, ready to face whatever came next. And as they moved forward, Ilara couldn't help but feel a new sense of hope. Hope that she could finally leave the past behind and begin a new life. Ilara stepped onto the human ship with trembling hands, feeling the rush of freedom flood through her veins. She looked around at the crew, humans, all of them, their faces filled with purpose. Commander Noah Michaels was by her side, leading her through the ship's narrow hallways. As they passed, Ilara noticed the way the humans moved with confidence, a shared understanding between them. They weren't just soldiers, they were a team, a family. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was different from the cold, oppressive walls of the Grixian facility. The air was warmer, the light softer, and the hum of the engines beneath her feet was steady and comforting. Ilara felt a weight lift off her shoulders as she followed Noah into the main command room. This was where the humans made their plans, where they decided what to do next. "Noah," a voice called out as they entered. It belonged to a woman with short, dark hair and a stern expression. "The perimeter is secure. We're clear to leave." "Good," Noah said, his voice steady, but Ilara could hear the tension in it. "Get us out of here." The woman nodded and turned to a control panel, fingers flying across the buttons with practiced ease. Ilara stood by, still trying to absorb everything. She had been freed from the Grixians, but now she had to learn about this new world she was in, the world of humans. It was nothing like the one she had known before, but it was full of possibility. After a few moments, Noah turned to her, his eyes softening. "You're safe now, Ilara. I know this is a lot to take in, but you're not alone anymore. You're with us." Ilara swallowed hard. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that things could be different now, but the fear of everything she had experienced, the years of suffering, the years of isolation, still haunted her. She had to remind herself that the humans weren't like the Grixians. They weren't her enemies. But trust didn't come easily after so many years of pain. "I don't know what to do now," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to live outside of that place." Noah nodded, his gaze understanding. "We'll help you. You don't have to figure everything out right away. Take it one step at a time. We'll teach you. We'll guide you." Ilara nodded slowly, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too heavy. She wasn't sure she was ready to speak them out loud just yet. For the next few days, Ilara kept to herself, observing the humans as they went about their work on the ship. She watched them as they planned their next move, studied the way they worked together to maintain the ship's systems, and listened to their conversations. The more she saw, the more she began to understand something that she had never known before. The humans weren't just strong because of their technology or weapons. They were strong because of their bonds with one another. The crew respected one another, but it was more than that. They cared for each other. In the brief moments when they weren't working, they would share stories, laugh, and support one another in quiet ways. It was a new concept for Ilara. She had never experienced that kind of connection, especially not with the Grixians, who saw their slaves as nothing more than tools. One evening, after a long day of learning how to operate basic systems on the ship, Ilara found herself in the mess hall. She had been avoiding it, unsure of where she fit in. But today, she decided to take a step forward. The humans were sitting together, eating and talking. She hesitated at the entrance, but Noah noticed her immediately. "Hey, Ilara," he said, waving her over. "Come join us." Ilara walked slowly over to the table, feeling a little nervous. She had never felt like she belonged anywhere. The Grixians had taken everything from her, and she had been alone for so long that she didn't know how to be part of a group anymore. But Noah's invitation was genuine, and something in his eyes told her that they wanted her there. She sat down at the table, and a few of the crew members greeted her with smiles. There was a man named Finn, who had short blonde hair and a quick laugh, and a woman named Sarah, who was always kind and patient. They welcomed her without hesitation, asking her questions about her life and sharing stories about their own. At first, Ilara was quiet, unsure of how to respond, but as the conversation continued, she began to relax. "I used to think freedom meant just being away from the Grixians," Ilara said after a long pause. "But now, I'm not so sure. Being free isn't just about getting away from something. It's about what comes after. What do I do now?" Noah smiled at her, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Freedom isn't a destination, Ilara. It's a journey, and we're here to walk it with you." The others nodded in agreement. It was a small moment, but for Ilara, it meant everything. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was part of something bigger. She wasn't alone. She wasn't just a slave or a prisoner anymore. She was part of a team, a family. And as they ate and talked, laughing together, Ilara realized that she was starting to believe in the possibility of a new life. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and Ilara knew there were still many challenges to face. But for the first time in years, she felt a sense of hope that had long been buried deep inside her. She was ready to take that next step. And with the humans by her side, she knew she wasn't walking it alone. The days aboard the human ship passed slowly for Ilara, each one filled with new lessons, new experiences, and new emotions she had never allowed herself to feel before. The humans were patient with her, teaching her how to operate the ship's systems, how to read their maps, and even how to communicate effectively with the crew. But there was one thing Ilara wasn't prepared for: the tests. It started when Noah pulled her aside one afternoon in the ship's training room. The room was large, filled with exercise equipment and training dummies. It smelled faintly of sweat, a sharp reminder that the crew worked hard to stay in peak condition. "Ilara," Noah said, his voice firm but kind, "you've come a long way in learning about the ship and how we work, but there's one thing we need to focus on now: your survival training." Ilara blinked, confused. "Survival training?" Noah nodded. "You're safe with us, but you need to be prepared for anything. The Grixians don't take losing a prisoner lightly. They may try to find you, and if they do, you'll need to be ready." The mention of the Grixians sent a shiver down Ilara's spine. She had spent so many years in their captivity, and the thought of facing them again filled her with fear. But she understood what Noah was saying. If she wanted to be truly free, she couldn't rely on others to protect her forever. She had to learn how to defend herself. "I understand," Ilara said, her voice steady. "What do I need to do?" Noah smiled. "Good. First, we'll start with the basics. You've seen us train before, so you know what's involved. But today, I want you to step up and test yourself." Ilara hesitated for a moment. She had never fought before, never even thought about defending herself. The Grixians had always been in control, and she had learned to simply survive by avoiding their wrath. But that wasn't enough anymore. She couldn't run forever. She had to be stronger, both for herself and for the humans who had saved her. Noah led her to a training dummy, a large, lifelike figure meant to simulate an opponent. "Start with something simple," he said. "Strike it with your fists, just like we practiced. You don't need to hold back." Ilara's hands shook as she stepped forward. She had never felt comfortable with physical confrontation, but there was something different now. She felt a flicker of courage inside her. The Grixians had taken everything from her, but they had not taken her will to fight for her freedom. She raised her fist and struck the dummy. The impact was weak, and she winced at the sound of her punch landing against the soft material. It didn't feel right. She wasn't strong enough. Noah watched her closely, his expression calm. "That's okay, Ilara. You're just starting. Strength doesn't come all at once. It's built over time. Focus on your form. Don't worry about how hard you hit. Just get the movement right." Ilara nodded and tried again. This time, she focused on her stance, shifting her weight, and following Noah's instructions. She felt the difference almost immediately. The punch wasn't much harder, but it was more controlled, more purposeful. "That's better," Noah said, his voice encouraging. "Keep practicing." For the next hour, Ilara worked tirelessly, each punch and kick more precise than the last. She was exhausted, but there was a sense of satisfaction in her progress. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but she was improving. The humans had shown her a way forward, a path where she could grow stronger and take control of her own destiny. By the time the training session ended, Ilara was covered in sweat, her arms aching. But as she looked at the dummy one last time, she saw the difference in her strikes. They were no longer weak, no longer uncertain. They were the strikes of someone who was ready to fight back, someone who had learned to harness the strength that had always been inside her. Noah came up to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well, Ilara. This is just the beginning. It won't always be easy, but remember, you're not alone. You've got us." Ilara smiled, a small but genuine smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt proud of herself. She had taken the first step, and that step meant more than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning, growing, and fighting for her future. As she left the training room, Ilara couldn't help but feel a new sense of purpose. The road ahead was still uncertain, and there would be many challenges. But she was no longer afraid of them. The Grixians, the dangers, the unknowns, they were no longer the things that defined her. She was the one who would define her future. And with the humans by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Days turned into weeks, and Ilara's life aboard the human ship continued to shift in ways she never imagined. The humans had become more than just her rescuers. They were now her comrades, her friends, and her family. She had learned to operate the ship's systems, trained in self-defense, and started to feel more at home in this new world. But she was beginning to realize that peace wouldn't come easily. The Grixians weren't the type to give up so quickly. One afternoon, as the crew gathered for a meeting in the command room, the mood was tense. The usual light-hearted chatter that filled the air was absent, replaced by a heavy silence. Ilara stood at the back, watching as Noah took his place at the front, his expression serious. "Everyone, listen up," Noah began, his voice calm but urgent. "We've received intelligence that the Grixians have launched a pursuit mission. They're looking for us, and they won't stop until they find us. We need to prepare." Ilara's stomach twisted with fear. The Grixians were relentless, and the thought of them finding the humans, finding her, was almost too much to bear. She had escaped once, but could she do it again? Could she survive if they came for her? "We've got a few options," Noah continued, his tone businesslike. "We can either take a longer route to our next destination, one that will give us time to lose the Grixians, or we can stand our ground and fight." Ilara's heart raced. The thought of running again, of hiding, felt like the safer option. But the humans weren't ones to back down from a fight. They would fight for their freedom. And now Ilara was part of that fight. "We can't keep running," said Sarah, the woman who had become one of Ilara's closest friends. "We can't let the Grixians chase us forever. We stand and fight, or they'll keep coming." Noah nodded in agreement. "Sarah's right. It's time we take the fight to them. We've trained, we've planned, and now it's time to show them we're not afraid." Ilara felt a surge of determination. This was it. She wasn't just a passenger on the ship anymore. She was part of the team, part of the fight. She had learned to fight for herself, but now she had to fight for all of them. "We'll need everyone on deck," Noah continued. "This isn't going to be easy, but if we work together, we can do it." Ilara's mind raced as the crew began to prepare for battle. She wasn't sure what to expect, but one thing was clear. She would have to face the Grixians head-on. There would be no more hiding, no more running. The moment of truth was coming. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Ilara worked alongside the crew, checking the weapon systems, securing the ship's defenses, and making sure everyone was ready. She could feel the tension building, but she pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for fear. This was the time to act. As the hours passed, the ship moved into position, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Ilara stood at the observation window, her eyes fixed on the vast expanse of space outside. The stars twinkled, distant and cold, but in the back of her mind, she couldn't stop thinking about the Grixians. What if they were stronger than they appeared? What if they had new weapons, new strategies? A hand rested on her shoulder, and she turned to see Noah standing beside her. He smiled, but there was a seriousness in his eyes. "We've got this, Ilara," he said quietly. "You're not alone in this. We're with you." Ilara swallowed hard, nodding. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the same confidence he did, but the doubt still lingered. She had faced so much in her life, and every challenge had felt impossible. But this time, she wasn't just fighting for her own survival. She was fighting for her new family, for the humans who had taken her in and given her a second chance. As the ship neared the coordinates where they would confront the Grixians, Ilara felt a deep breath fill her lungs. She was ready. She had trained, learned, and grown stronger. And now, with the humans by her side, she was prepared to face whatever came their way. The lights in the command room flickered, and the alarm sounded. The Grixians were here. Prepare for impact. Noah's voice rang out across the ship, and the crew scrambled into action. Ilara ran to her station, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no turning back now. The fight had begun. The first wave of Grixian ships appeared on the ship's radar, fast and aggressive. They were coming in from all directions, trying to catch the humans off guard. But Noah had anticipated this, and the crew was ready. The human ship began to maneuver, evading the incoming fire with impressive speed and precision. Ilara's hands shook as she prepared the weapon system. She had never used a weapon like this before, but now wasn't the time to hesitate. With a deep breath, she fired. The shot hit its mark, striking one of the Grixian ships and sending it spinning off course. Ilara couldn't help but feel a rush of exhilaration. She had done it. She had fought back. But the battle was far from over. More Grixian ships were closing in, and Ilara knew the fight would be long and difficult. But as she stood there, side by side with the humans, she realized something. No matter how tough the battle was, she was no longer fighting alone. The Grixians had taken so much from her, but now she had the strength to fight back. The battle raged on as the Grixian ships closed in. The human crew worked together with precision. Their movements synchronized as they fired back at the attackers. Ilara stood at her station, her heart pounding, her hands trembling as she gripped the controls. The earlier doubts that had lingered in her mind faded away. This was her moment, and she wasn't about to back down. Noah's voice crackled over the intercom. Ilara, fire at the lead ship. We need to break their formation. Ilara didn't hesitate. Her eyes locked on the lead Grixian ship, which was coming in fast. She focused on the targeting system, her finger hovering over the firing button. She had practiced this, learned how to focus her mind and steady her hands. With a deep breath, she pressed down. The shot was precise, striking the enemy ship dead on. It exploded in a burst of light, sending debris scattering through the vastness of space. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. It was the first time she had taken down an enemy ship, and the feeling of success washed over her. Nice shot, Ilara. Sarah's voice was full of pride over the comms. But there was no time to celebrate. The battle was far from over. More Grixian ships were still in pursuit, their weapons firing relentlessly. The human ship continued to weave and dodge, but the Grixians were relentless. Noah, we can't keep dodging them forever. Finn, the ship's engineer, called out from his station. We need to find a way to stop them, or we'll be overwhelmed. Noah's face tightened as he surveyed the situation. I've got an idea, he said, his voice steady despite the pressure. Ilara, I need you to help us. We're going to send a pulse through their systems. It'll disrupt their ships long enough for us to escape. Ilara nodded, already adjusting the settings on her station. She didn't fully understand how the pulse would work, but Noah's confidence was enough to drive her forward. She trusted him, and she trusted the crew. They had become her family, and she would do whatever it took to help them. On your signal, Noah, she said, her voice determined. Now, Noah shouted. Ilara hit the button, and a powerful pulse shot out from the human ship, aimed directly at the Grixian fleet. The effect was almost immediate. The Grixian ships jerked and slowed, their systems briefly malfunctioning as the pulse cut through their defenses. The humans used this moment to their advantage, firing with all their might, quickly taking down 2 more enemy ships. The remaining Grixian ships tried to regroup, but they were too disorganized, too weakened from the pulse. Within minutes, the battle was over. The Grixian fleet, once imposing, was now in ruins, floating helplessly in space. Ilara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was over. The humans had won. Great work, everyone. Noah's voice rang out, full of pride. We did it. Ilara, that pulse was spot on. You saved us. Ilara's chest swelled with pride as she looked out the observation window, seeing the scattered wreckage of the Grixian ships. She had faced her fears, had fought beside the humans, and now they had won. This victory wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about proving that she belonged, that she had a place in this new life. As the crew began to celebrate, Ilara stayed at her station, watching the stars in the distance. The calm after the storm felt surreal. The tension in the air had faded, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. She was no longer a prisoner, no longer someone who had been taken and broken. She was free, and she had fought for her freedom. Noah approached her, a proud smile on his face. I knew you had it in you, he said, clapping her on the back. Ilara smiled back, her heart light. I couldn't have done it without you all. You showed me what it means to be part of something. Noah's eyes softened. And you've proven that you're a vital part of this crew, Ilara. You've shown us all that strength isn't just about fighting. It's about perseverance, trust, and loyalty. You're one of us. Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she truly believed it. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. The crew gathered around her, laughing and sharing stories of the battle. It was a lighthearted moment, but Ilara couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She had once been lost, a slave with no future. But now, thanks to Noah and the humans, she had a family, a purpose, and a future full of possibilities. As the ship set course for their next destination, Ilara stood at the window once more, gazing out into the endless expanse of space. She had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She had her freedom, her strength, and her new family beside her. Whatever challenges came next, she was ready. The stars twinkled in the distance, a reminder that no matter how vast the universe was, Ilara had found her place in it, and with the humans by her side, there was nothing she couldn't face.